Correspondent Chris Chambers has been following the hearing at Liverpool Town Hall.
He said, in hindsight, I wish I had called the police earlier. He said it's something I do think about every day, what I should have done and how this is my fault because I'm the one who drove him there. He said I should have checked on the welfare of the children and also helped. He went on to tell the inquiry it was terrifying, that he was in complete mortal terror and shock, but how he regrets not helping the children on that day.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiring to get campaign funding from Libya. A court in Paris has ruled he'll start serving his sentence even if he appeals. Mr Sarkozy has vowed to clear his name. It's understood Jaguar Land Rover has got some of its IT systems back online after being hit by a cyber attack. The car maker has suspended production for more than a month after the breach at the end of August. Ministers are considering stepping in to help keep Jaguar's suppliers stay in business. Ticketmasters agreed to make a series of changes after the widely criticised Oasis ticket sale. Fans will be given more pricing information when they join online queues and be informed when cheaper seats sell out. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 36 points at 92.13. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.14. LBC weather. A dry and settled evening for most. Patchy fog developing in northwestern areas. Lows of 5 degrees Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daisy Steele.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. We're streaming this hour live on Global Player and the LBC app if you'd like to watch us as well. Now, as you know, on a Thursday, we like to talk to one person about their particular area of interest or expertise. And today we're going to talk about the issue of helping young people into employment. Because 1 in 7 of this country's 16 to 24-year-olds is unemployed. Now, unemployment is actually, historically speaking, at a very low level. But it's been going up, or it's gradually been creeping up over the last few months. And I'm afraid I think that this trend may well continue. And there are all sorts of different parts to the labour market, but it's always been the case when the economy isn't doing particularly well, it's usually younger generations that are hit hardest. That was certainly true in the early 1980s when youth unemployment was a real issue then. I mean, it is an issue now. I don't think it's reached crisis point, but you can see circumstances where that might well happen over the next few years, particularly with the advent of AI. I said in my talk up that we learnt a few weeks ago when Piers Linney, the former Dragon's Den star, was on the show, where he was talking about AI, which I always admit is a subject that switches me off completely usually, but he really made me sit up and take notice when he said that graduate employment jobs in this country are 33% fewer than they were last year. And he attributed this not wholly, but in large part, to the fact that, for example, large management consultancies or accountancy firms are not recruiting in the way that they were. Banks aren't recruiting in the way that they were, because a lot of the functions that graduates used to perform can now be carried out by AI. Now, we are only at the beginning of the AI revolution, so this can only get more challenging. Now, I've always believed that technology is actually a generator of jobs, not necessarily just a destroyer. And if you think back to the early 1980s when computers really just started, or the early 1990s when PCs really came into their own, everyone thought then that they would create mass unemployment. Actually, it was the exact opposite. Technology, the computerization, the advent of the internet, I think were all generators of jobs rather than destroyers of jobs. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with AI, but clearly there will be quite a few sectors that are going to be affected by it. So if you are setting out into the employment market, whether you're leaving school at sort of 16, 18, or whether you graduate 3 or 4 years later, I suspect the environment is quite daunting now, depending on what you actually want to do. So maybe you are in that age group and you're finding it difficult. Well, I want to hear from you over the course of the next hour. What are your experiences? Are you approaching it in the right way? Well, I've got someone with me in the studio who can hopefully give you some very good advice on all of this. It's Ronel Lehmann, who is founder and chief executive of Finito Education, which seeks to help young people transition from education into employment. Ronel, very good to see you. We had you on the programme, I can't remember when it was, but it was a couple of years ago now, I think. And I think a lot of people found your contribution really interesting and helpful, particularly younger generations. How have things changed in the job market for particularly, let's say 16 to 30-year-olds?
It's got very, very tough. There is intense competition right now for every single role. It's not good enough just sending out your CV. Many candidates who come to us, they don't even get a response. They aren't invited into interview. They have no chance to find out how they can be better. I mean, that is really sad. But I think the problem begins with education, because the schools, the colleges, the universities, and, we're all grateful for the education we've had. They are only interested in the qualification you get and the results that you get so that they can market themselves to the next cohort of pupils or students who enrol.
So they're much more interested in exam results and the league tables.
Yes. And here I've got the Sunday Times Good University Guide, for instance.
I was looking at that last week.
Yes, and what's interesting when you open it, it's not about where you are in the table. The thing that I'm always interested in is graduate prospects. What happens when you leave? And unfortunately, they're not interested in you. No school, no college, no university. They're not really interested in you when you've left, because they've done their job. You've got the qualification. You should be, in their eyes, ready for the world of work. But the fact is you aren't. And it's extremely tough right now.
Well, perhaps we ought to encourage the government to include in the league tables for schools and universities. I think they do that in the Sunday Times Guide, sort of the number of people who leave school and then go into higher education or get a job. Because if you've got two similar schools and one's got a recruitment rate of 10% and another one's got 80%, well, you kind of think, the 80% one has got its head screwed on.
Absolutely. I mean, tomorrow we're publishing a report, the Better Schools report, which is written by Tim Clark, and it's being launched at Mansion House. His title of the report, which made me think about, as I was walking over here tonight, was No More Rhetoric. And in fact, that applies to everything that we're talking about this evening, because unless we actually do something to help young people when they've left education, they're going to find it very hard.
So is this something that the government should be changing its sort of approach to, that local education authorities, or indeed the schools themselves?
I think all of them have to. I think there has to be a focus on what happens when you leave. Talk to the alumni groups. Find out after 3, 6, 9, 12 months, have you found meaningful employment? And let's not forget why this is so important and why I'm so passionate about this work is because young people will never be happy. And I feel young myself, and you do too, but young people will never be happy if they don't have a purpose.
Increasingly less.
Oh.
Well, that is the thing. If you're not in education, training or employment, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and yet you see most of your friends or peer group in one of them, inevitably that is going to depress you. And there will be a lot of people who don't know how to get out of that situation, because the longer you're in it, the more difficult it is.
It's a spiral, and we see it. Parents call us and say, I've got my son or a daughter, we urgently need help, because they've made lots of applications, they've been rejected or not heard from anyone, they're getting depressed, and it's a terrible spiral.
So if somebody is in this situation, it's difficult to generalise, I suppose, but is there any general advice that you can give to people in younger generations, but I suspect a lot of this also applies to older generations too, as to what to do if you're not getting any response to job applications that you put in? I mean, you're going to have to change the way you do it, I suppose.
Absolutely. And although we're talking about the younger end today of the market, we also help people at the more senior level. I mean, we've got some former members of Parliament who lost their job last year who are looking for portfolio careers. We have board executives who've suddenly found themselves out of an organisation and want to transition. But what is really needed is when you look at the CVs that come through from a candidate when you first meet them, they always start with, I am a team leader, I am one, these personal statements, which are horrendous. And actually, no employer wants to read a personal statement at all. They're designed to help you become more resilient, to think more of yourself, to be confident and so on. And I totally concur that it's needed at a point. But when you're actually applying for roles, it's about you, the employer, me, the candidate, and we together. And usually the credentials, the CV that we have to redo with the candidate's permission, of course, is to help them stand out from a crowd.
There are lots of companies that charge maybe thousands of pounds for this kind of service to sort of make a CV. I remember a couple of years ago when I was asked to apply to become a non-executive director of a financial regulatory authority, given that I know nothing about financial regulation, but that's another story. And they said, can you send, or the headhunter that approached me said, can you send me your CV? And I'm thinking, well, last time I did my CV was probably about 2005. Yeah. And of course, things have changed an awful lot in that time. And constructing a CV, it is an art, isn't it?
Yes. So we employ journalists who actually will interview the candidate and rewrite it in a form that someone who doesn't know you will immediately understand. The second thing, which is really important, most CVs that I receive and my colleagues look at, they run into many pages. Now, if you go fishing and you want to catch a fish, you know that you put the bait on and you throw the rod and the line into the water and you catch. When you're applying for a role, if you put all your details and everything you've done, there's nothing to ask you. There's no reason to call you in. So by editing the very document that every student comes to you with, you can really improve their chances.
And yet, 20, 30 years ago, when I had to do CVs, you were thinking, well, if I put it on nice vellum paper, that'll make it stand out from the crowd. Well, that may still be the case, I suppose, but you do have to make yourself stand out from the crowd because you might well be up against several hundred other people.
Yeah, I mean, most parents want. I know mine did. They wanted a doctor, a lawyer, and an accountant. In my case, they got 2 doctors and they got the black sheep of the family. So, but
you've done okay for yourself.
Thank you, very kind. but the thing about the innovative approach, it's really, really important. I mean, we had a young man who wanted to be a solicitor, and rather than and I know it's a very regimented route of applications, but he actually produced. He was very, very clever. He produced a writ to a law firm that he wanted a meeting with, and he sort of served it on them, and the quantum of the claim was that they would invite him in for an informal chat. That was very smart and actually got him ahead of the crowd. Yeah. So there are ways of getting yourself into a firm. I mean, many candidates will make an application. If they get an interview, they've never visited the building. They've never spoken to a member of staff on the way out to say, well, what is it like working here? They don't do any research. And then when they get in there, they haven't even looked at the website. So there's lots to do, and you cannot delegate the responsibility to Finito. You have to actually work at it yourself.
But all of the things you've just said ought to be taught in schools. I mean, we were talking the other day about financial management in schools, and there's I mean, I'm sure some schools do a brilliant job on that, but most don't include it in their curriculum. And this is a sort of thing where everybody who leaves school, whether they're going to university or not, at some point, they are going to have to do a CV. They are going to have to make a job application. And you'd have thought that would be a basic thing of the last 2 years of their school education. But it isn't, is it?
No.
Always.
And many candidates come to us and say, I've had 10 minutes of careers advice in 3 years.
Well, that's scandalous.
It is.
But if playing devil's advocate, I suppose from a school's point of view, they'll say, Yeah, but we can't do everything. We've got to follow the national curriculum to a degree. Head teachers do have flexibility to a degree. But, OK, so you want us to spend half an hour each week talking about financial management. You want us to spend half an hour or an hour each week on preparing people for the workplace. What would you like to drop instead will be the question that the head teacher then throws back at you.
I remember Damien Hines when he was Education Secretary, and he always spoke about education as being the journey. And I think he was right.
OK, well, we'll come to more aspects of opening up the job market to younger people to try and explain what people need to do to really get themselves noticed. And I think that example that Ronel just gave about the person who applied to a law firm of solicitors by essentially recreating a writ, I mean, that's the kind of imaginative thing that you have to do to get noticed. I get lots of emails from young listeners, some of whom want to do work experience. And I mean, I get so many, you can't possibly say yes to everybody. I do try and respond to everybody, but you've got to stand out from the crowd. And I mean, I can think of two people who did stand out from the crowd, who I did meet up and give some advice, and they're both now working as national journalists in the media. So it can work, but you've really got to think, well, what is different about me? What can I offer that somebody else can't? That I think is the secret to success in any job application. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to talk to Ronel Lehmann. He's founder and chief executive of Finito Education. You're listening to LBC. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Listen on the move with the LBC app. Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 19 minutes past 8 on LBC. Ronel Lehmann is here, founder and chief executive of Finito Education, which seeks to help young people transition from education into employment. Just before we go to some calls, let's talk about the role of parents here, because I think you said earlier that you have a lot of parents seeking your advice. And I think that must be an awful situation where you want to give your son or daughter the best advice possible, but you don't want to become a sort of a nag, a moaning Minnie, and sort of say, get out of bed, it's 9 o'clock, you need to get yourself out there. And I mean, depending on the approach, I suspect it can be quite counterproductive.
Yes, I mean, parents are often the first call to us to say, look, we've got a problem, or we've got one son, the others are doing really well, but he's really struggling, and how can you help? And we also have to be careful that, you know, their offspring aren't told they have to go to Finito, because otherwise they might rebel. But the beauty about us is that, you know, we have over 100 mentors. None of them are in careers advice or education. They're all people who've got a demonstrable track record of excellence, who want to help candidates and feel passionate about it. And so, unlike parents, they're not judgmental. So you usually find that a candidate will bite your arm off because they want the help. They realise they're hitting their head against a brick wall. They're going round in circles. It's not working out for them. Their friends are perhaps in really good jobs and they are not. So I think, we do a good service for them, and, they keep in touch.
And I think also, if you come from a particular background, or you have parents who are on the pushy side of things, that can be a problem. I always quote an example. My friend Aisha Hazarika, who is a national broadcaster, she's now in the House of Lords. She comes from an Asian family, and her mother still thinks that she's a failure because she hasn't become a doctor or an accountant, which sounds ridiculous, but I think that is true. And some parents really want to push their children in a particular direction. I was lucky. I come from a farming family, and as the oldest son, I should have taken over the family farm. I knew from the age of 8 that I had no intention of doing so, and luckily my parents didn't try and exert any pressure on me. They always supported me in everything I did. But that's not always the case, is it?
Well, we often deal with very successful parents, and they do sometimes cause problems with their offspring. Either that they feel that they're never going to be able to emulate their father or their mother, or they have a sibling who's doing better than them. I mean, you talk about parents. My mother is 87. She still thinks I should go and do a master's at Harvard.
And you probably could.
Thank you.
Right, should we take a call? Let's go to Susie, who's in Richmond. Hello, Susie.
Hello, good evening. Your guest this evening talked about possibly schools giving more help to youngsters about taking initiative when they're trying to get a job or approach a firm, and how people, for example, the youngsters haven't even visited the building. But this is what you do if you have initiative. But teachers are public sector employees. They never did this sort of scoping and ferreting to get their jobs. So how do you imagine that they might communicate that to school children? They can't. It's only the self-employed, the get-up-and-goers who might do that. And that's not state education teachers. Sorry, but it just isn't.
Well, that is a statement rather than a question, but I think you're absolutely right. But I don't want to speak ill of teachers. We all remember those who...
No, I don't, and I had some wonderful ones.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but and they are inspirational. I remember, a teacher in my school who used to always walk into the class and say, "Take a chair, everyone," because in those days we were standing up and we all sat down.
Yes.
Well, I picked up.
I agree completely.
I picked up the chair and walked out the room.
I don't think they have they don't have the gene, for want of a better word, or the life experience to say, right, this is how you get really edgy initiative, and you do this and you do that, and you go round here and you go round there, and you get in the back door.
I'm sure
and you
there
do
are
this,
some teachers that do that.
Yes, a few, but not in general.
Well, I mean, I think you've made your point, and I think it's a good one. But I don't think you can say that all teachers are like that.
And I think the problem is that it's a bit like sex education in a way, because most teachers in schools who have to teach sex education, they'd rather not do it. They're not experts in it. They're generalists. And it's the same with careers. I mean, you're not going to... You'll be very lucky if you have a specialist careers person in a normal school. I'm sure they do exist, but in most they probably don't. Susie, thank you. Glenn has a bit of a warning for you, Ronel. AI can write the most incredible CV, so even this guy's business will be done before you know it.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Glad you came now, aren't you?
Yes, very much so. We have Sir Anthony Selden on our advisory board, and he wrote the book Fourth Education Revolution 6-8 years ago, and he said that 30% of all jobs that we're teaching pupils today will not exist in 10 years' time. So you can tell an AI CV from one that we've written. Many employers are using anonymized applications, so you can't put your name on the CV for certain roles, certainly in financial services, increasingly in law, accountancy. but they can tell whether a document has been written using AI. And you've got to be very careful, because they will set you tasks. And if it's not your work, you'll be
found out.
You'll be found out. So thank you, Glenn.
Dave says, my daughter is 21 years old and she's struggling to find employment. She has a higher national certificate in business, which she recently passed. She has A-levels and she has dispensary qualifications in pharmacy. They keep banging on saying that many young people under the age of 24 don't want to work because of mental health problems. My daughter hasn't got mental health issues and she cannot get a job. So what chance does someone who does have them have of getting employed?
I'm very sorry to hear that, Dave, and it must be heartbreaking to watch your wonderful daughter, who's studied and succeeded in this terrible spiral. The only thing that I can say is that you have to be resilient, you have to believe in yourself, and you mustn't give up. And those are qualities that even Glenn, who said, our business will not be operational, you have to believe that you can succeed. And I think that does come from the parents, but maybe she needs a mentor. And there are lots of people out there who will help her if she only asks. So if she could get a mentor in the areas that she wants to work, find somebody who works in a business that she's interested in and talk to them, non-competing business, that will really help her with the information that she needs.
Not everyone is out there, though. Not everyone is an extrovert. Not everyone is, just from their personality, can push themselves forward. What do you do if you know that you are a bit shy, that you're an introvert? You're not. You may see maybe the managing director of a company that you'd really like to work for. You may see them in a social setting, just coincidentally. But you just can't quite bring yourself to push yourself forward and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had somebody a few months ago who I think was 17, and I said, "Oh, what do you want to do for a living when you leave school?" And he said, "I want your job." And I thought, that's my man.
Yes. Well, I remember walking into one of our boardrooms, and it was one of the large ones, which was silly for a two-meeting person. But the candidate sat at the head of the table. He put out his iPad, his diary, his watch, his phone. It was all there like a fiefdom. And I sat in the middle of the boardroom table, started the interview, and after about 10 minutes, I just said, "But why have you sat there, not in the middle?" He said, "I wanted to show that I could be a CEO."
Wow.
And so I asked him to pick all these things up and come and sit opposite me, and we started again. Now, he was never going to be employed if he did that. So they don't know. Often people look at social media as the way that, they're going to find work. Posting on Instagram, that is great. But when an employer or HR department looks at what have you been doing, I mean, one of the classic things is a candidate got asked, "Do you drink alcohol?" And she said, "No, of course not." And HR said, "But we've looked at your Instagram account. You're holding a glass or a bottle 26 days out of 31. Now, if she had said, "Yes, of course I do, but when I'm employed, I will not drink during office hours," that would have been the right answer. So, there are tips.
Is that something that most employers do now? Check out the applicant's social media?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Because even 5 years ago, I suspect that not the majority wouldn't have done that.
No, well,
it's called due diligence, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, your listeners might think here is a confident man who's sitting opposite Iain Dale, one of the greatest broadcasters, and I'm not nervous. It's quite normal to have some stage fright, before you go into a studio and you have to speak. So we all understand that moment that you have to step up and be yourself. And so it works best if you practice.
And being yourself, I think, is so important, because if you're trying to sell something false, people will pick up on it.
Absolutely.
When I can remember that the organisation that asked me to apply to go on their board as a non-executive director, I had to be interviewed by the chairman and two other non-execs, and it was on Zoom, which I'd never been interviewed on Zoom before. And I thought before it started, I'm going to be completely honest and say, I mean, I had done my research on them, and they were saying sort of what their priorities were. And I said, yeah, but the problem is no one's ever heard of you. And they said, well, thank God you've said that, because that's why we wanted to interview you, because we think you can help on that. And we just sort of hit it off personally. And that's I mean, people who are doing the interviewing, they are human beings just like the person who's being interviewed. And if you can get a connection somehow, that you're halfway there, aren't you?
So we try and teach people to use humour at the right point in a meeting. It's very, very important. At the end of the day, you're going to be sitting with somebody in their office or working as part of a team. They want to know that you are human.
Well, in a way, it's a bit like dating apps, isn't it? You've got to match with each other in some way, because if you don't, then they'll find someone who will. Simple as that. Right, we're going to take some more calls. We've got lots coming in, so we've got half an hour to hopefully dole out a little bit of good advice to people. So we want to hear from you if you are in that kind of age group, or if you're a parent who is really struggling with the fact that your son or daughter can't find employment. You think, well, it's not their fault. They're doing all the right things, but it's just not happening. So do keep listening. It's 8:31. Let's get the news headlines on LBC with Daisy Steele.
Every adult in the UK could be required to have a mandatory digital ID as part of plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister is expected to announce further details on the Brit card tomorrow. It's believed the names, addresses and pictures of around 8,000 children at nurseries in London have been stolen in a cyber attack. The company, Kido, is facing a ransom demand. Sir Keir Starmer says he won't be distracted by reports of moves against his leadership. The Prime Minister was speaking after Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham claimed Labour MPs are pressing him to mount a challenge. LBC weather, dry and settled with clear spells for many, some patchy fog developing in places, a low of 5 degrees Celsius.
This is LBC.
Hi.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:34. We're streaming this hour live if you'd like to watch us on Global Player or the LBC app. Ronel Lehmann is with us, founder and chief executive of Finito Education, and we're trying to talk about the problems that younger people in particular are facing getting into the jobs market. William is in Lewisham. Hi, William.
Hi there.
What would you like to say?
I've got real concerns about AI across the whole economy, really. I mean, I think it's not just young people who are going to be struggling in the future, it's all of us. And what is frustrating is watching successive politicians queue up in front of the tech bros, just waiting to let them in and you know, take what they want, really. I mean, the big tech companies as it is don't really, they're not known for paying what most of us would consider to be their fair share of taxes and using loopholes to bypass, national tax systems. And so I kind of think, well, all that's going to happen is they're going to rake in the profits as their AI systems take all the jobs that ordinary people would normally be doing. And the politicians are so blind to it because they just can't wait to accept the glittering new gems that these people are offering, and all the rest of us can be sat around without work. And then the big question at that point, when it's too late, is who's going to pay for everyone to just sit idle? I know I'm maybe taking it to an extreme, but I get frustrated at the fact that no one in government seems to acknowledge the impact it has on jobs. And they all talk about retraining, just as, there was the whole move towards retraining in cyber years ago, and everyone talks about the internet and the birth of the computer and the industrial revolution. But this is nothing like those things. This is utterly seismic. This is, 1,000 jobs gone and 10 created type territory. And I don't think that anyone realises what the impact is going to have. And on top of that, you were talking earlier about, obviously about education and the progression through education and into work. But, if you haven't got people coming in at the bottom, doing those early stage tasks, learning their trade, as it were, moving up through industry, we're going to have people dropping off at the other end as we all die and no one to replace anyone. And then what? Is this utopia that we all hope for? So I'm scared.
William, I was going to ask, what do you do?
I normally work in TV, actually, as it happens.
Well, you're finished then.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's an industry in of itself. I mean, I'm trained to be an electrician simply because, the writing is on the wall. I mean, our problems are something not wholly AI created, but, it's like, it's all a problem. In my industry, 60% of people that work in my area, which is unscripted, are out of work. I'm going off on a tangent now, but do you see what I mean? It's like there's a huge impact there from a combination of technology and advertising issues. And no one talks about that, really. The government don't care. We're all ready to give Land Rover a load of money, but what about us, But I digress. And I just think that the fact that the tech companies get to sort of, put on their big fancy show that everyone's all excited about the fact that you can, generate some video content. You can, bring your nan back to life from a photograph. Great, all good. But, what about the actual fundamental human impact, the thing that's going to happen in 10, 20, 50 years' time?
I completely take your points, but, there are beneficial things that these companies provide. LinkedIn, for example, which is a massive positive. I can't think of any real negatives about LinkedIn. It does connect people in the world of employment.
LinkedIn doesn't steal your job, though.
No, it doesn't, and you're right to make these kind of warnings. And I think you're being slightly unfair on government, because in the end, if all of this goes the way that you're suggesting it might, that is going to impact massively on government. And as I've said before in these sorts of phone-ins, the government is always at least 10 years behind the technology. And that's a real challenge. I can't see how they can legislate their way out of this.
Well, I guess it comes down to taxation. There's constant talk of wealth inequality, and people are screaming about it. And it's like, and yet no one on it. And it has to be done internationally, of course it does. But, it can't go on like this. And the problem with governments here and everywhere else is it's so short-termist. It's the next election cycle is the target in the sights. And the current government couldn't care what's going to happen in 20 years, because most of them will be retired off or working in business somewhere.
Again, I think you're being very unfair. The skills minister is my good friend Jackie Smith. Now I know what motivates her. I know what gets her up in the morning. She would be horrified if you thought these things about her. Now she hasn't got a magic wand that she can wave to sort of make sure everybody sort of gets a job. She can't do that, but she is as concerned about this as anyone, I can assure you. And anyway, if you want to phone in on Monday, she's on the Cross Question panel live from the Labour Party conference on Monday evening, William. But thank you. Really, really interesting call. Emma says, Ian, to the young lady with dispensary qualifications, I recommend a general practice setting and not commercial pharmacy. Put herself out there with a CV dropped in. Good dispensers are hard to find. That could be a song title, couldn't it? Let's go to Mark in Gloucester. Hello, Mark.
Hello there. Now, I'd like to put a slightly different view to finding employment after further education. I've had a great success in business in employing people straight from school with various forms of qualifications and bringing them through the business. Now, there are many, many businesses out there that will do this, Tesco's, the Armed Forces, to name but two. And once you're in on the grassroots at any level, at any job, you then can go forward within those organisations quite easily, providing you turn up, say yes, and do a good job with the position you've currently got. So what my view is that rather than going through further education, why not go straight into part-time, shelf-filling roles, or the armed forces who do want people who say yes, and take it from there. So without the cost of education and the time lapse and everything else. And that's my view.
Well, I think you've made a couple of really good points. Firstly, I would only say that the rise in national insurance has actually reduced the number of those retail jobs which young people, as you say, stacking shelves, might have been able to get. And that is a real problem right now because, while someone is looking for a meaningful career, they actually do want a job, a part-time role or other job to keep them occupied. Employers always look for people who are employed. They actually prefer people who are employed when they apply. So they can raise their chances. The other thing you talk about turning up, that is something that's also to do with resilience and being able to be disciplined. Those things sometimes are not as, how can I put it, that they don't have the experience of what is required of them at that younger age. That doesn't mean all of them are not going to do that, but it's a good point. I remember my father sent me to the market, age 13, to Church Street Market on a Saturday and Wembley Market on a Sunday. And it was the best thing that I ever learned.
And what were you flogging?
Shirts. But you had to deal with money, you had to deal with customer complaints. It was absolutely superb. Now, today we've got risk assessment, we've got insurance, we've got parental controls, you've got chaperoning, anyone under the age of 18. So many people don't get that Saturday job and don't get that exposure to the world of work until after they finish their education.
I would love to say that mucking out pigs on a Saturday morning for my father prepared me for the world of work, but I would be lying. Mark, thank you very much. Chris said, Mr. Dale's job and those of his fellow presenters should be quaking in their boots because they will not be needed anymore. Just put an AI voice in the studio. Yeah, but you wouldn't get my little quips, would you? You wouldn't get me singing the odd song down the micro... Yeah, I'm rather defeating my own argument there, aren't I? Let's go to Andrew in Liverpool. Andrew, I am coming to Liverpool on Saturday. What would you like to say?
I'd like to say where you're coming, and I'm coming...
Well, I'm going to be at the Labour Party conference, and we're going to do our show from there on Monday and Tuesday. You've just basically summarised what I've done today in a school. So I said to the year 11s, year 7s, by the time you get to year 11, your CV, your application will be looked at by AI. They will look at your digital footprint. So be careful what you put out there. And so they'll also look at your achievements. And lots of smiles went on the faces when I said, have you ever been on the school website for winning a chess competition or winning a race? One of them went, yeah, I'm on this website for winning a tennis competition. I said, well, from the age of, they're 11 years of age. I said, you need to start keeping a record of all this. Yeah.
So we used to have a thing back in the day. I worked for a college, and they come in with the record of achievement, which was a folder full of the certificates. We need an electronic record of achievement for children to boost their esteem, to keep a record of what they've achieved. So that's like from a very early age.
Well,
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, David Young, Lord Young of Graffham, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, when he was in government, he was developing a digital passport for school children, and successive governments did not bring it about. And it was a great shame because it would have given somebody the opportunity to say who they are, what they've done, what they've achieved, and also look forward to where they're going. And this digital passport at school really should be embraced.
Well, I've initiated that in the school I work in. I worked with postgraduates during COVID, and I said, right, you create your own digital passport. So I showed them a very easy website where they could set up a website where they could actually, and this is the key to the point I want to make, they're all going around filming things. Film yourself. You said before about practicing. Practice yourself answering interview questions and watch it back and base everything on your experience. As you said, these CVs, they're just, I'm great at this, I'm great at that. What employers need is evidence. So I'm saying to the 11-year-olds, go and get that evidence. Go and volunteer. Go and get involved. Do something. And I said to the postgraduates, you're actually not qualified for much at the moment other than you've got a degree. How many other people have got those degrees? What have you done on top of that degree? What makes you you? What makes you interesting? Do a 1-minute presentation of yourself. You're then on the employee's desk. Any employer would click on that link to say, this is me. And you're in front of the face then. And working on those confidence skills, working with people who have got anxiety, who aren't confident, is key, because in the end, they will get interviewed, whether it be online or whether it be face-to-face. So practice those skills.
Very wise words, I would say, Ronel, there from Andrew.
Yes, I thought so too.
Great call, and your pupils are very lucky to have you, Andrew, given what you've just told us. Thank you very much. We'll take more of your calls and questions in just a moment. It's 8:46.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We will be discussing Andy Burnham and whether he is pitching for Keir Starmer's job. And you'll be hearing from Patrick Marber, the comedian, the director, the writer, who has just opened The Producers at the Garrick Theatre. All that is available on our free Global Player app.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Iain Dale on LBC.
8:49. Now, here's a question that I don't think I've asked for many, many years on LBC. Have you ever considered getting cosmetic surgery? Because apparently more and more men are doing just that. I've never understood, whether you're a man or a woman, why on earth you would try and fiddle with your face, and it is mainly your face. I'm not exclusively. So we're going to explore that over the next hour. A little bit of a different topic to the usual fare, I have to say. Ronel Lehmann is with me, founder and chief executive of Finito Education. We're talking about the current challenges of the jobs market, particularly in relation to young people. Sam from Cambridge says, can you ask your guest whether employers look and value seeing a DOE on a CV, by which I assume you mean Duke of Edinburgh's qualification?
Well, anything that shows that you have actually achieved something an employer is interested in. I don't think you can just single that out. There are lots of things that people do, whether it's their hobbies, whether it's their interests, their travel. So you need to put that on the CV, but you don't need to put every single thing that you've ever done.
OK. David's in Newcastle. Hello, David.
Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I was just saying to your producer that I find the whole jobs-seeking market absolutely bewildering at the moment. I mean, like I say, I think I've spoken to you before. I'm 63, and I retired in 2020, and I've thought a couple of times about looking for a part-time job. And I go online, and it's just, really? And I can't see where the correlation comes that you can fill this form in online, go and get an interview and get a job. And as I said to your producer, when I applied for a job that lasted me 35 years, I applied for the job, I went and did some tests which were basic arithmetic, a little bit of trigonometry, and I had to describe a vernier gauge, which is lying on the bench in front of us, using just plain English language. And I get the impression going back then it was to find out whether I could add up and whether I had a good use of English. And then I had to go to a college and put an engine in a wagon. I'd had mechanical experience before, and then I got the job. But it was all pretty straightforward. And I mean, I know it's a time gone by, but I mean...
So now you think it would be very different?
I was going to ask you, David, have you actually focused on what it is that you really would like to do, rather than perhaps go online and look at what is available?
After 35 years of a high-stress, heavy engineering job, I want something that's going to be very easy, like sort of stacking shelves, putting beans on shelves, cutting grass, something like that. Something where I'm not going to get stressed out. But anything really, just 1 or 2 days a week, part-time.
I mean, we have a great shortage of engineers. I was sitting next to the chairman of the National Motor Museum, and he's saying we're having real problems getting young engineers. Is there no way that, with all your engineering experience, you could yourself inspire the next generation of engineers? Is there nothing that you could impart, teach? Because you find that very enjoyable.
Yeah, I mentored many apprentices over the years in various disciplines, from assembly to fabrication to CNC operation. And I mean, the apprentices that were hard, they were all top notch. And most of the lads that I had have gone on to be engineers and design engineers, which, you know, I'm proud of that. And I still talk to the young lads now.
Well, I think you've just answered the question of what you should be looking for.
Well, because also it gives you something to do, but it would give you, clearly from what you've just said, a huge amount of satisfaction too. David, thank you for that. Sanjay says, I'm 26. I work in hospitality as a waiter for an agency. I graduated in the summer of 2024 and I'm still looking for a full-time position. I didn't do too well in my degree. I got a third-class honours, so I know it's trickier for me to gain employment from the rest of my peers who've got higher grades in their degrees. It has been very overwhelming throughout my employment search because there's the constant doubts and negativity that builds as time goes on with not being employed full time. I think that's a really interesting one, because I suspect there are a lot of people that find themselves in Sanjay's position. I mean, clearly employers do take notice of grades of degree, but personality is so much more important, I always think.
It really is. But
how do you get that over in a CV?
Yeah. So I mean, we look at the pandemic where lots of people had their education cut short, they never finished their degree. Employers were actually very understanding because we all went through this terrible period. I don't think you should look at yourself at your third class degree and think that you are third class. You're not. You have got a qualification. I think what you need to do is find the right hospitality opportunity. Now, it is tough. They are really suffering, and the national insurance rise has affected hiring in leisure and hospitality, travel, the whole industry. But Sanjay, you sound like somebody who can succeed, and we wish you well.
You just need that one break, don't you? And you never know when it's going to come. But in the end, if you persist and you show people the positive side of your personality, show them what you can do for the particular organisation that you're applying for, and that break will come. I know it's easy for me to say that, and I sit here in the job of my dreams. But it wasn't always like that.
No.
I mean, everyone, I think, whatever they achieve in their life, there's always been times that they found challenging, or maybe they haven't got a job that they wanted to do particularly. But hopefully it'll come all right in the end for you, Sanjay. Let's go to Darren in Godalming. Hello, Darren.
Oh, hi. Good evening, gents.
Yeah,
hi. My question really is to do with how you structure your CV and how you format it. Do you, for instance, structure your CV to be read by AI robots first of all to get through the first sift, or do you really still aim to write it for a person to read it and get an insight into you? What's the right sort of balance to be struck there?
I think it's a document that you yourself feel proud of. If you've got confidence in your own CV, then you are going to be able to engage with an employer. I wouldn't worry about whether your CV is being read by a bot. Of course, human resources are employing AI to screen candidates, but you need to be able to be proud of your own CV. It's your passport to your future.
And take pride in the appearance of it as well, rather than just a sort of bog standard Word document. Have a little bit of design to it to make it stand out from anyone else's.
Yes, we photograph all our candidates, and we include the picture on the CV. Yes, and then the same photograph can be used on LinkedIn, and of course there are anonymised applications, in which case we remove them. But you know, often you find a candidate who comes in. You talk about the shy ones, and they sort of hand you their CV like that. When they've got something that they're proud of, they'll hand it to you, and with a sense of pride.
Okay, Darren, thank you. Let's go to Tom in Woking. Hello, Tom.
Hi, thank you for having me on, Ian.
Not at all. What would you like to say?
I'd like to give a corporate perspective on what is actually going on in the financial services company that I'm working for. It's currently a global company, and the introduction of AI is coming in thick and fast. And from what I can see, the corporates are looking at savings as individual people lost, adding to their bottom line. And it's very worrying from an internal perspective. And I can only have sympathy for the younger generation. The AI is taking over entry-level jobs. Specialized jobs will be the ones that remain on the market. And I can see it becoming much more harder for the younger generation to break into the market.
And what would your advice to them be?
It would be, how do you stand out with the onset of AI? How do you make sure that your skills are seen different from everyone else? And I think there is a need to think about how we as a market use the companies that we're going for. So I think some large companies have dominance over the market, and it's very difficult for young people to break into that. Perhaps new entrants into the market might be a better way than going with the old traditional companies.
Well, thank you very much for that, Tom. One of the things that we train people on is HireView, and HireView is that package that graduates, young people have to go through before they can make an application to some of the corporates. Certainly in the financial services industry, it's used widely. I think from where I sit, the most important thing is that if you do get rejected in the application process, currently you have no one that you can call and say, how could I do better? And that is wrong.
We've come to the end of the hour, which is a shame because we've got lots of calls and lots of other questions, but we do have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed. That's Ronel Lehmann, founder and chief executive of Finito Education. Coming up in the next hour, growing numbers of men and younger people are getting facelifts. It's difficult to say. A trend driven by social media, advances in surgical techniques and the rise of weight loss drugs. Figures from the British Association of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons show facelifts are on the rise in the UK. In 2024, there were 1,882 procedures, up 8% from the previous year. Women accounted for the majority, with numbers rising by 7%. But the steepest increase came from men. Procedures grew by 26% in 2024. Why on earth would anyone want cosmetic surgery?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. Political parties are criticising government plans to make it compulsory for all adults in the UK to have a digital ID. It would verify a citizen's right to live and work here. The Tories call it a gimmick, while the Lib Dems say people shouldn't be forced to turn over their data. Labour MP Jo White explains why she's in favour.
The